And we are live as I try to hide a cough drop. This is John Reed from Diginomica with another edition of Enterprise Hits and Misses Radio. And yeah, it's a little bit of a solo flight today, though. I may have a drop-in guest or two coming. So this is the only Enterprise show without a sponsor, and we'll never friggin' have a sponsor. We want to have frank talk, but there'll also be drop-in guests and surprises because it's pretty unscripted. Having said that, just to kind of give you a quick update, we're going to be talking about B2B content strategy debates and the myth of hyper-personalization for a little while today. And I want to explain to you why I think that's actually a really important topic for every enterprise professional to reckon with, instead of like some debate for a handful of so-called gurus who understand AI better than the rest of us. Anyhow, I'm going to explain that in a sec. But I do want to mention that while you're just seeing me at the moment, I'm booking my show calendar. I started out this show experimenting with my guinea pigs, friends, to test out the format and make sure that this highly interactive style would work. I think it does. Now I'm going to be branching out a little bit, bringing in some folks that I've always wanted to put in the chair, some people that I really respect who are not necessarily my close friends. But there will still be a lot of recurring guests who are familiar favorites. Brian Summers is going to be a staple of the show, for example, so you'll hear from him frequently. But I do have some very interesting guests lined up. Brian can't provide a lot of estrogen, so we're going to have some really smart female guests as well. Hi, LinkedIn user. How we doing? Always good to see you. You've been with us from the beginning. I appreciate that. So yeah, I think you're going to really enjoy some of the guests I have lined up. I'm not going to spoil that for you now, but let's just say the next 3 are booked, and pretty soon the next 7 or 8 are going to be booked. It took me a while to kind of get all that sorted, but anyhow, yep, Brian, he's going to be back very frequently. So Brian and I think we have a good thing going, and so he'll be around quite a bit. But I'm going to throw some different people at you as well, because I think it's interesting to put some other people in the chair also. So that will happen. Anyhow, we may even get a drop in from Brian today. I actually want him to come talk about his latest blog post on modernizing ERP. But we'll see. I have not heard back from Brian, so he might actually be working on an important project this afternoon. But anyhow, if you're in the chat, you might as well chime in, because you might get tricked into coming on cam as well, depending on where we're headed here. But I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about this issue of what I call the great B2B content debate. And underneath that is an imperative, which is that I believe that sales and marketing need to fundamentally change. And, just so you know, I think there's a little more pressure on that right now. I just talked to a couple of vendors who were freaking out because, we haven't been able to get the leads that we used to get at the trade shows. Can't wait till trade shows come back. And so it's like, as soon as shows are back, we'll go back to our traditional scanning badges and, slamming leads into our system and stuff. Well, I'm not going to say that's a failed way to approach sales, but it's diminishing returns, and it's a part of your overall framework. But folks who idealize that approach are going to run into a lot of trouble. But I do these B2B content strategy sessions at every single level, because it's highly important to individuals as well. Because, for example, whether you're a solopreneur or in your own career, if you don't understand the methodology behind content and community, then no matter how good your skills are, you're going to find yourself shortchanged from a career perspective. So that's point one. Point two is that small businesses are very impacted by this. I run a Facebook group for my town that's pretty large, and small businesses are constantly posting ads and cheesy giveaways and gimmicks, which are all against the rules. Follow us, and the next 1,000 likes, we'll draw one out of a hat and give you like a thermal blanket or something. And it's like, well, that's not the best way to really position your business in your industry. And, only a small percentage of small businesses have figured that out and have created compelling content that will actually allow them to get their posts approved and make a difference in their community. Fundamentally, this is about becoming part of your community in a way that resonates from your expertise, rather than marketing the hell out of that community. So the bottom line is, my view on sales and marketing is that salespeople must become experts and advisors, and marketers need to become journalists and educators. And you can probably imagine what the cultural resistance to that is. And in the large enterprise space, this is an issue as well. But the interesting dilemma there is that large enterprises have large enterprise budgets. And so they're being pitched with AI and hyper-personalization essentially as a way to get around this problem and avoid the culture change, in my view, in favor of throwing money and tech at the problem of attention, right? So because it's really fundamentally it's about attention, and it's about reaching people at the right moment. And one of the big things that gets lost here is the distinction between B2C and B2B purchases. Although I guess you could argue the real distinction is between complex purchases versus impulse purchases, right? But there's very few impulse purchases in B2B. In B2C, there's a ton of them. And so influencing a consumer in an impulse purchase scenario, I think AI can actually probably do that a little bit. It's a little bit diabolical. I don't think it's really necessarily appropriate or right to do it that way. But anyhow, it can be done. But in B2B, that doesn't always translate. And one of my big themes around this is that there's an underside to hyper-personalization, which is the way in which you alienate certain core members of your audience. Perhaps it doesn't matter a whole lot in the consumer side of things, but in the B2B side of things, it can matter a great deal, right? Like if your spam bot approach to marketing alienates a key decision maker that you're in your next project, well, that's not such a great thing. So for reference on Diginomica, if you want to dig into this a little bit, there's a couple pieces. If you look up the myth of hyper-personalization under my name, algorithms are still undermining the customer experience. You can kind of see my fundamental take on this. And what I'm doing is I'm taking this view of hyper-personalization, I'm clashing it against a different approach that I think is much more powerful and effective. So I'm going to just briefly walk you through a little bit of that. But one of the core issues here that I think is really, really important is that what I find most marketers are obsessed with is more, I think that they appreciate content marketing, the power of content to engage, but I think they think that their content generally is good enough. And I could not disagree more. Most enterprise content is just not what you would call differentiating. It's just not good enough. Now, there are some exceptions to that. For example, like obviously you want to have a bunch of FAQ content around your products and stuff. It's not incredibly hard to do helpful FAQ type content, and it doesn't have to be the Moby Dick. It just has to be effective within that context. But when you talk about trying to earn trust, earn buyer trust, and basically win over people who are not drinking your Kool-Aid yet, well, your content has to be a lot more differentiated, a lot more powerful than what it is. And I have some people chiming in on Twitter about something totally different, which is I just posted a link to a new AI translation engine that supposedly is the best AI translator ever created. So have a look at twitter.com, JohnnyERP, if you want to see people chiming in on that. But anyhow, back to this point now around content. So I think that's essentially the crux of the matter for me, is that differentiated content is really hard work, and culture change is necessary, because in most enterprise organizations, how many people are really committed to creating differentiated content as part of their jobs? And even if they are, how many enterprises will take their muzzles off their employees enough to create that content on social media? Part of the pitch that I give smaller businesses and individuals is just quit getting on social media without a point of view, or without having really crafted content that resonates with your expertise. Like, start there, and then you have something to share and engage with. I think so many people are just empty vessels on social. I call it peacock feathers, but preening for no reason. Whereas if you have the spaces of content, then you can really start making a difference in people's lives, and that's how you earn trust. And I think trust is just a really, really underrated aspect of what B2B buyers care about. So essentially, you have a juxtaposition then of two radically different points of view. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think AI can be incredibly useful in terms of various aspects of sales and marketing, nor am I throwing out all the traditional things that salespeople and marketers do. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but in general, when you're thinking about this, like, yeah, like, so I just talked to a client the other day who's like looking at traffic generated by our content and looking at how individuals wind up integrated into their CRM system. And then they're assigned, of course, a score. And based on the different types of score, there might be different kinds of automated triggers, or a salesperson might follow up with someone if they reach a certain threshold. And that score might be dictated by things like engagement with content, amount of times on the site, sign up for various things. And that's all, I think that's all effective. And so I'm not necessarily saying that AI cannot be incorporated into this, but I just am very, very wary of what I perceive as sort of a throwing very expensive technology at this problem of hyper personalization. And a lot of it has to do with an obsession with context. And if you guys have been following Thomas Weber et al., who's appeared on this program, he's doing a really good job of outlining sort of the problem of the obsessing over the 360-degree view of the customer and such in his Ahead CRM blog. So check out his CRM combos on LinkedIn for more on this. But one of the points that we've been talking about there is, so what I describe is the need to build opt-in audience around what you're doing. So instead of just thinking about people as prospects in kind of a narrow way, think in B2B, think about all the people who influence buying decisions who might never buy from you, whether it's a subject matter expert or an independent advisor or a journalist or even like an executive that moves from one organization to another. You still want them to be part of your community, part of your world. And if you're relevant to the problems they're trying to solve in their lives, then you can do that. And the notion of opt-in communities is the notion that people start opting into what you're doing and sharing data with you. And if you have that, then why do you need to obsess over why you need to reach someone in a particular moment? Because moment to moment, I think, our attention spans are very fleeting now, right? So in one moment, I might be in a shopping cart. In the next moment, I might be getting a text from my mother about her COVID test, and suddenly I'm shifting gears. Why do I need AI to predict my context every single moment? In many cases, when it comes to e-commerce, it's always wrong anyway, because they're deferring on past behavior. But yeah, I just bought an exercise bike. I don't really need to see another one in my feed. So this attempt to predict, and this notion that AI as it currently exists is intelligent enough to predict context, is basically bullshit in my opinion. And so what I've been trying to do is to create a viable alternative. So instead of calling BS on AI per se, I'm trying to come up with a different way of looking at that same problem. And I talk about it in terms of opt-in audiences as a way of thinking about a different framework. And so I think there's a lot to be fleshed out there. That opt-in audiences, by the way, I do want to give credit to Robert Rose of the Content Marketing Institute, because he kind of rolled out that phrase in the B2C content marketing world, and I sort of stole it. So if I had to take a paternity test on that phrase, I would not get it. So thanks to Robert Rose for some stuff. If you look up John Reed and Robert Rose on Diginomica, you can look up our original debate that I have with him. If you want to look a little bit more on B2B selling in 2021, then just do a search on that piece, Give Me Industry Expertise Over the Flawed Pursuit of Hyper-Personalization by John Reed. And you can check that out. But let me just walk you through just a few things in that piece. And just a reminder, post comments and questions in the chat. And I may actually switch gears in a little bit if I have a drop-in guest come in. So we'll see. But I wanted to get this down. I'm going to be doing a workshop on this, I think, locally pretty soon at a virtual event. So, I kind of needed to do a bit of a dry run of some of these ideas. So here's a comment. LinkedIn user: how do you differentiate between corporate ambitions, people motivated through performance of an organization, to individuals who've been key in an organization on a lower level of staff engagement? I think it's a little bit tricky too, right? Like, to what extent do you expect people to kind of tie into a corporate brand and corporate mission, versus to what extent do you allow them to go off the reservation and position themselves as experts in their own right and stuff like that? I think what increasingly folks are realizing is that kind of massive retweeting and reposting of corporate brand views is sort of an empty thing to do. And what's much more powerful is having your own employees, like go out there and establish their own particular expertise, but within the context, hopefully, of your overall sort of corporate mission and identity as well, so that there's not necessarily a conflict between the two. Now, granted, some employers don't want to do that, and they have this knee-jerk thing that if you become too successful, then you're going to become a sought-after commodity, and you'll leave them. And look, to some extent, that's true. But I think the smart companies realize that even if someone leaves for being sought after, it's still a draw to other people. Let me speak to that from this piece on B2B selling that I wrote a couple weeks ago. I said, though I don't believe in the magic of hyper-personalization, I do believe in the magic of exceptional content. Content scales in a way relationships don't. Some of the best business relationships you'll ever form stem from content. And today I spoke to a supply chain vendor about getting their experts to buy into this model, which I think pertains to the question we just got in the chat. They're looking at a number of options, including podcast production. And so we talked about how the hardest part of that is culture change. So what are the components that are needed to get back to this question? One is executives need to embrace the cross-organizational imperative of devoting time content, encouraging experts and product leads to create it. Could it become part of their KPIs? It warrants discussion. So leadership needs to take social media muzzles off their experts. Otherwise, there is no authentic community to be built. And that's a really important point around this, because I sometimes use this phrase opt-in audiences. Other times I use the phrase opt-in communities. And I think what we need to acknowledge is that perhaps there's an evolution there where the community is the highest ground of all. And opt-in audiences, an audience implies perhaps a slightly more passive relationship. A community member is an even more active relationship, and they might even be generating some of their own content as well. And one of the very interesting things that comes up around all of this is that, communities in enterprise settings always get a kind of they're sort of like the step children of investment in a sense. It's kind of like investing in community is kind of like investing in training. Like it's one of the last things you do. And if you look at community moderators and community leaders in organizations, a lot of times they're underpaid, undervalued, and they're doing really, really important work managing communities, because if you don't manage communities in a smart way, you end up, kind of silencing the dissenting voices, and suddenly your community is a wet noodle of like corporate views and it empties out. And I could tell you about some vendors that have experienced that the hard way. But one of my foils around all this stuff is Matthew Sweezy from Salesforce. He was a Diginomica partner, by the way, but I got to know him before I even knew he worked for Salesforce. But he wrote a book called The Context Marketing Revolution. He also wrote a podcast series called the Electronic Propaganda Society that I recommend you listen to. It's fantastic listening. But he dropped some eye-watering stats around Salesforce's Trailhead community. Customers who complete the onboarding program and join the Trailblazer community, including Trailhead, buy on average twice as many Salesforce products and remain customers 4 times as long, producing significant overall increases in user adoption and lifetime customer value. If that's not a case to be made around this other approach of building opt-in communities, I don't know what is. And look, I'm not telling you not to spend any money on AI, but I just think this hyper-personalization pursuit is sort of an excuse for not making the culture change that's necessary to make. So when you look at subject matter experts, they must also embrace that role if this is going to happen. And yeah, it's tough when you have project deadlines bearing down on you. And look, there are going to be times where customer go-lives take precedence over everything. But when vendors tell me that their experts can't write because they are, quotes, busy with customers, that raises flags. Good content engages more prospects and customers. A good FAQ, for example, can save an expert from countless repeated conversations while expanding the reach of that advisory. So basically what I'm telling you is that an opt-in audience solves a lot of algorithmic guesswork. And hey, it can even actually feed your AI systems with more data from users who have voluntarily shared their data with you because they think you have integrity. Bonnie says, what are the hottest communities forming, says Bonnie? LinkedIn, Twitter. What about the new thing, Clubhouse? Yeah, we're getting Clubhouse. Yes. Derek DePries wrote on my colleague wrote on Clubhouse on Diginomica, and Den Howland and I got into it in the comments for that, so you can check that out. He and I had a little bit of a fisticuffs around it. The gist of it is he was taking the piss on Clubhouse, and I was trying to make a little bit of a different point. I think we weren't really disagreeing. He was just saying there's no business model behind it, and frankly, I don't really care if Clubhouse succeeds or fails. Anyway, that wasn't really what I was interested in. What I was interested in, if you guys aren't familiar with Clubhouse, it's sort of sparking around Silicon Valley now, as far as Elon Musk, I think, wrote about it recently or tweeted, but it's still in a beta, so you can't get in there unless you get invited. It's iPhone only right now, or iOS only. You can do it on a tablet too, I think. But basically, it's informal audio only discussions. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about it is because I made this point in the comments, but by being unapologetically audio, it is different. Because someone pointed out that like there's Discord, which is already available for Android, but the thing about Discord is it's also video. And when you have video and audio together, essentially what you're going to end up doing is you're going to discriminate against audio people by default, because video people are going to have center stage. I mean, look at how it works on Zoom. When audio people call in, like it's not the same as the video people as far as the presence that they have in the conversations. So by being resolutely audio only, it's quite interesting, because what you're doing is you're freeing people up to think of it as something they can do while they're puttering around, which I think totally changes the vibe. And it's more of an informal hangout, as in a Clubhouse, right? Where you don't always have to be paying attention. You can chill and get distracted, then come back to the conversation. But one of the points that Bonnie's raising here, which I think is vitally important, is that, she asked about the hottest communities, LinkedIn, Twitter, or New Thing, Clubhouse. The problem is that communities are spread out now, right? So when I talk about opt-in community, that's really more of like what your database ends up as. But the cultivating the community might get you spread out in all kinds of places, because people, you kind of have to strike a balance, because I do think you need some stuff on your own website, but at the same time, you have to go where your practitioners are, and you won't be able to go everywhere. So you're going to have to make some choices around that. And yeah, I mean, I think Clubhouse for some could be part of it. It's early days. LinkedIn user says, if I get a Clubhouse invite, I'll share it with you all, and we should experiment these kinds of podcasts in there. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if I did Clubhouse, it wouldn't be a replacement for this, because this has a different level of visibility. And I think there is something to be said for video in terms of just the immediacy of it. But I would see it as a supplement to this, where if you had certain kinds of video conversations like that, you could also have like a reaction session, or just a different session sparked by it, where you could just have much more peer group oriented, just discussions. One downside I can tell you with Clubhouse right now is that there's no like releasing of the recordings. You can't access, there's no recordings. Now, in theory, you could maybe record it on your side, but the point is, I would be a little bit less attracted, I think, to something where I couldn't re-release the audio later, because I do think that post-event consumption is a pretty crucial thing, at least in my world it is, for B2B. But anyhow, I still think it warrants experiment. And yeah, we need to do a Clubhouse for experimental purposes. That's kind of what I was saying, is I'm interested in trying it at some point. But I'm a Droid. I'm an Android guy. I can't stand iPhones. So I'm not going to be anywhere near there until there's an Android version. So my appearance on Clubhouse is going to be delayed at this time. So yeah, I might be switching gears in just a few minutes. I may have a guest coming, or I may have someone else popping in on cam. So we shall see. But I did want to take the opportunity to share this with you guys, because I think that whether you're an individual, small organization, or an enterprise, there's an opportunity to differentiate around content. And obviously, if you're a smaller company, the option to do AI is out of the question in that broader, more expensive, elaborate sense of hyper-personalization. But I think you could still elegantly integrate these ideas into a lead generation model as well. I'm not for a minute going to say that lead generation needs to be thrown out. I'm just kind of trying to be hyperbolic about it, because I'm just getting sick of dealing with marketing, PR, and salespeople who are trying to cling to old models, which once Brian Summer and I referred to that as golf course relationships. Like, this used to be an industry where you wine and dine people. That was the big deal. And look, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that you're never going to take someone to a football game ever again. Back in the early days of big shows like Sapphire Now, there were some establishments that were visited in Orlando to close deals that were not what I would call particularly reputable. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I just think that model is going out the door. And I think it was a corrupt model to begin with, because it wasn't about truly establishing value. And I think for salespeople, the challenge is on, which is, it's much more of a challenger sale model now. It's an ROI selling model, because a lot of companies that you sell into, they'll tell you they don't have budget for your product. So it becomes your job to demonstrate what that value is, and show them that that they need to do it, because it will actually free up their budget in the short term. But you can only do that through a value generation exercise during the sales process. And you can't rely always on some other expert to do that while you come in and schmooze with the big personality. And big personality is a lot harder too when you can't even get someone on the friggin' phone. So how do you do that? Well, if you're a trusted advisor, that's a whole different story. I mean, I know a lot of customers and vendors, they won't make a move without calling a certain advisor or analyst that they trust. They won't make a big move without consulting them. So this is really more of a reflection of that, is that you want to be part of that inner circle. Oh, hey, looks like we got Brian here. How we doing? Yeah. Wait, those whining and dining days are over. Thank goodness. Yeah, man. I always thought it was so corrupt. Of course, let me be totally honest. Some of that was sour grapes on my part, because I couldn't afford to take people to, fancy, a weekend in Maui kind of thing, like to close their business. So I was always up against it with that model. Anyhow, I'm a terrible schmoozer anyway for stuff like that. I suck at that. So I was at a disadvantage anyway. So frankly, I am enjoying the fact that's going out of style, but I always thought it was just BS. It's like, who can show the company the best time gets the deal. And you're talking about a multi-year implementation project. And now you wonder why so many of those projects either failed or didn't live up to what they were doing. Geez. Hey, Brian, if you're listening, just grab the link from Twitter. I already sent it to you. Just go your Twitter direct messages and just click on that. And once you're on the back end, I'll bring you in. And we're actually going to talk with Brian about modernizing ERP, which fits into a little bit of this discussion, but from a different angle, based on a provocative post that Brian wrote on Diginomica that a lot of readers didn't, I don't think, fully understand. So I really want to get into that with him. So Brian, let me know if you have any trouble finding that link. So yeah, those whining and dining days, the hell with those days, man. I sucked at that. I totally sucked at that. We got Brian. All right, here we go. Returning champion, Brian Summer, back for more. How we doing?
I'm okay. I'm here. I actually had some dental work yesterday. I'm not too happy about, but I'm actually speaking, and I'm not all beat up from it, so I feel pretty good.
Brian, your audio is a little faint to me. Audience members, are you having any trouble hearing Brian? Let me know.
Let me jump on the settings and see if I can adjust that.
Live without a net on the video show. Testing 1, 2, 3.
And one more thing I'm going to check. Let's see.
Asking anyone who's watching, can you just let us know how well you can hear myself and Brian, just so we do a quick sound check? What I hear in my ears isn't always accurate, so.
I think I've done about all I can do on this end, John.
Oh yeah? Okay, let me just see if I can do anything on you on this end. It's getting better. Let me just check on Mike's settings here.
Oh, let me do some other things to knock out all these other apps that are probably chewing up bandwidth. So hold on.
Brian, I just jacked your microphone volume up too. Let's see. Test it again.
All right, can you hear me now?
I might have distorted you. Let me turn it down a bit. Try again.
Well, let's hope it's better now. We'll have to just go with this. Is that okay?
Yeah, we're better now. Okay, good. Thanks, Brian. So, sorry, you were saying about your day yesterday. You had a little bit of a doozy of a day.
Had a little dental work done. I'm not going to, disturb your listeners and run them off by going through that. So I'll spare that.
Well, I hope that this beats the dental chair. The John Reed Enterprise chair should be more comfy.
Yeah, the good part of this is I can always just get up and leave here. It's a little bit different. A little different issue when you're in the dentist chair. Anyway, so what did I miss so far? Sorry for being late.
Well, I was just no, it's all good. I was going through a bit of a rant and a methodology around B2B content strategy in my debate with hyper-personalization. But the part that ties in with you is I was talking about how sales need to change and how many years ago in Diginomica, you and I wrote about the golf course relationship thankfully going out of style. This whole idea that the way you win B2B business is by whining and dining people versus demonstrating the value you can bring is like finally fading. Thank God. It's still there, but at least it's not as dominant as it was.
Okay. Well, then I just finished a briefing call with a vendor, and what were they doing to me? They were giving me the buzzword fire hose treatment, and all I was getting was one buzzword after another. Like I'm sitting here with a friggin' checklist, to make sure that they cover them all. And at the end of the call, I just gave them some counsel and said, look, guys, people don't want to buy buzzwords. They want to buy a new end state for their company. Tell them where you're going to take them. Tell them what that journey looks like and show and prove to them that you can bring some value along the way. And if you can't do that, then they're not going to listen to you anyway. Maybe for the vendors that, have unlimited expense accounts and obscene gross margins, they can afford to wine and dine, people. But I think the market's moved. There was a whole book called The Challenger Sale. I'm looking at right now.
I just talked about that. I'm a big advocate of those approaches. Continue.
Yeah, and that's me all the way around. Somebody calls. Okay, it was
nice job.
Okay,
that was my buzzword. Yeah, Challenger Sale. You already guessed my buzzword. Well done.
Okay. Well, I'll be watching the mailbox for my prize. But the whole deal was I learned a long, long time ago that my golf game is terrible. So if I'm going to have to sell a big consulting job like back in my Accenture days, I either had to do it based on the level of my personal relationships with folks and my golf game to go with it, or I needed to be a subject matter expert that could justify the highest possible billing rate you could get because of what I know. Well, I choose that one. I chose that all day long. And again, I'm left-handed, so I don't bowl right. I don't golf the correct way. So I made the right choice for me.
Yeah, like you and me, we weren't well cut out for that world. Anyhow, I was saying I couldn't afford to take people to Maui, so I was always highly resentful of that business model. Anyhow, but I think one of the importance of the challenger sale type methodology now, Brian, is that you can wine and dine people all you want, but you're not in their budget, so they can't afford you, and so you have to. Your job now is to go in and show how you can take the money from their existing budget and transform their circumstance in some way, either by automating or saving money or building out some new revenue stream. So the golf course is irrelevant to that, It's irrelevant.
But on the other hand, too, depending on where you're at in the state of the lockdown, you're not going to be taking these people out anyway. They're not.
True that. Yeah, I guess we have to.
The office.
Yeah, true that. We, probably that. But part of what I was saying, Brian, is that a lot of people just can't wait until that model comes back, right? So I was having a conversation yesterday about we can't wait till we get our trade show back and we get all those hot leads again. It's like badge scanning frenzy. And I was trying to tell them, I was like, Well, first of all, it's not come back right away. But second of all, like, you know, you need to start changing your model. It's not like you're never going to do that again, but like relying on that, no. Not when there's so much opportunity to carve out your own topic authority and so much opportunity to earn the trust of buyers by solving their problems. And one thing I talk about in the piece that I wrote on why selling and marketing has to change, I talk about a couple of examples of companies that go in as part of a sales process and show you something about your internal systems you didn't know. And regardless of whether you do business with them or not, you leave them with a snapshot that shows them how they can improve. Like, and to me, like, that's the essence of the challenger sale model, is I can go in and show you something you don't even know. And even if you don't do business with me, I've generated goodwill out of that,
I'll take it a step further. I used to show up all the time at prospective clients, and all I knew walking in the door was they wanted to talk about X, and X could be something like, say, shared services. And I'd go, okay, let's see how much I can guess about your situation. And I would throw up this like PowerPoint slide or whatever, and it would be the top 10 screw ups most people make on shared service. And I'd go right down the list, and everybody in the room is just like, oh my God, he's talking about us. I mean, it's like, I can't tell you how many times people would pull me aside going, you had to have had a mole over here to know all those things about us. I'm going, no, I've seen this problem. This movie is one I've seen again and again and again. And you know what? The beauty about that kind of an approach in a sales call, if you will, is immediately the prospect now knows that you have way more knowledge about that kind of problem than they do. That's number one. And number two is where your competitors are doing this blah, blah, blah about, how big we are and how big our global network is and blah, 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 Well, guess what? Nobody cares about that. What they care about is, can you fix our problem? I don't need, it's like if you went to a doctor, I don't really care as much about where they went to med school or how many patients they had last year. What I care about is, do you know what's wrong with me? And do you know how to fix it? That's what I care about. Have you seen this problem before? And I think a lot of people get lost on the value prop. If you've got a moment, John, and we can do the screen share, and I know you and I tried this once before. It was a little bit problematic. I might send you something called the Undeck. You know how that 7-Up was the Uncola? I have something that's called the Undeck. It is the worst. It's the worst enterprise software sales deck you've ever seen.
Oh, and dude, try uploading that to LinkedIn, and I'll see if I can upload it from not LinkedIn, Twitter. Try to upload it there, and I will then download it and see if I can pop it into because I need to see the worst sales deck. That would be pretty awesome. We'll see if we can get it out to our viewers. I think we should be able to. We tried this once before with mixed results, but I think. Oh, and by the way, you probably saw that Greg wants to join your PR team. He says you're innovating at scale while actualizing value with broad value appeal. So, nice job, man.
Man, I'm feeling my paradigm shifting all over again.
It's funny when a vendor describes themselves as a paradigm shifter, that's always a good sign that your virtual event's going to be a real dud. That just happened to me recently, actually. But so just kind of continuing on while Brian attempts to get this slide deck going. So when I get into this thing on why sales need to change, I talk about this challenger sale model and how to sell systems in a pandemic economy. Suddenly a budget with no room for your product makes room, because you provided a meaningful look at how you can change the prospect's business, ideally with a demo that's actually built on their data. And so my thing is that I think a lot of salespeople in the B2B realm aren't equipped with the ability to do that, nor do they know how to do that. That's the concept of I don't want to walk away from people after I show them something of value. But in the opt-in community model, that's great because they're still a part of your community and they still are going to refer other prospects to you. And so it's not so much, oh, I won that deal, I lost that deal. It's more a matter of I continue to generate an opt-in community around my product, and those people be back. That's the whole point. Is they're now saying, "Hey, I respect you. You help me with my business. I might not buy from you right now. I might buy for you later." And to me, the whole like whining and dining thing, sending someone tickets to the game or whatever, the pandemic equivalent of that, Amazon gift card, I guess, that's for people who are already signed on contracts. If you want to like say, "Hey, thanks for being a customer," but that's not going to win them over or get them to renew. That's more just a nice thing to say, "Hey, you helped us out. We're glad to have you as a customer." That's more of a nice to have now. Thank God it's not the essence of the deal anymore. I'd be screwed. Wow, Greg, man, if you ever want to stop implementing and working on important projects, you could probably do this for a living. A market leader in the engagement of knowledge acceleration to deliver a platform of productive disruption. Yeah, because the great thing about disruption is, it never affects production. I mean, that's the beauty of it. There's no contradiction there at all. There's no tension. All right, Brian, did you send me that yet? Are you still working on it?
Well, it turns out I have like 5 of these undecks. There's no shortage.
Okay.
There's no shortage of really bad ones out there. So hold on, I'm just going to pick one and send it to you. The one I'm looking for, there's one I have on resellers that's a hoot and a half. So it blinked by me a moment ago, and I'm going to find it here just any second. Yeah, got her. Okay, I have found the deck. You want it in Twitter? Is that where you want it?
Yeah, just send a Twitter direct message. So I use this anecdote around hyper-personalization, because I juxtapose this fetish with hyper-personalization against what we're talking about here. And so here's this anecdote. This fall, I heard from a PR firm pitching AI-powered hyper-personalization for hotel chains. They claim we could avoid searching for our loyalty numbers at hotel check-ins. Instead, I was told AI and ML can help brands solve these challenges by automating hyper-personalized offers. I responded, I'm a member of many loyalty programs. Some are better than others, but none of them have succeeded in the type of hyper-personalization you're describing here. One reason I'm very cynical about this is, even if they have the right data, they think, I don't care if John has never stayed here recreationally before, send him the recreational offer anyhow, because 10% of people like him bite it. I don't care if it bothers him or not. And so my point was, until businesses are willing to change that, we can't really talk about hyper-personalization because it's just too easy to spray and pray. And in B2B, the whole point is that spray and pray is something with a significant downside. In consumers, you can accept collateral damage from a campaign. I'm not so sure you can in B2B, right? Because what if the person they tick off is you, Or what if they tick off Greg Robinette, Greg's not going to greenlight their project if he hates their spam bot and can't get information about their services. Yes, Greg, we can execute this optimal level. I'm not sure if we're at the optimal level right now. I think we're a little bit of a work in progress. Okay, so let me just see if I got your deck yet, Brian.
It's not going through on Twitter, but I did send it to you on your email. So.
Oh, it's on my email. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, anyway. It's all right. So let me think about how I'm going to do this. So just prattle on for a sec while I figure out how we're going to solve this problem.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, I will say this deck that's coming up is, I didn't realize I moved John completely out of the view now. All right. All right. Well, while John's gone, I will tell you, there were a couple of things that did surprise me this week. One had to do with, not even IT analysts, we can agree on everything. And there sure were some differences of opinion on the Solona, Synovia, SAP kind of stuff this week. And if you're a little confused on it, well, join the crowd, because I guarantee there's not unanimity within the analyst world on that space. I was also surprised there's an IT service management firm called Sharewell, as in like Sonny and Cher. And they are interesting to me, nice people, really nice, out of Colorado. And I know they've had, they were owned by KKR, I believe, and they recently got acquired very quietly a couple of weeks ago by a company called Avante. And that's headed up by Jim Shaper, who many of the analysts and others would know as the head guy that used to run Infor many years ago. And that's one I'd like to dig into a little bit more and find out more what's going on there. John's back. I don't know if he's ready yet.
Not quite ready. Keep prattling on for a sec.
All right. So anyway, I just thought those are some of the kind of more interesting stories over there. I also found out I got hacked. A database had gotten hacked from a data aggregator, and they exposed my name, address, several phone numbers, email addresses, that kind of stuff. And the more I dug into it, I found out that that information was put into this database by a car dealer. I'd bought a car from 4 or 5 years ago, and I never knew about it. I never consented to that. They put it out there, so I contacted the company, and I knew I'd get a response because I asked them, and who's your legal representation on this matter? And I immediately got an answer within 48 hours that, well, we're not going to do anything for anybody because no one could use that information to open, a credit line. But they did expose a lot, and I beat them up pretty good for it. So we'll see what happens. There you go.
So can we see it?
Yeah. Can you put it on the display mode instead of the edit mode it's in right now?
Oh yeah, I'm always terrible at that. Let me think. How would I do that? Is that
it should be down at the bottom right. There's a deal that gives you full screen or a presentation mode. But way down at the bottom right next to the scale, the 100% down there.
Crap, I don't see it.
Well, get down on the control line, way down at the bottom. Keep going.
Wait. Yep.
There's a full screen. It's to the left of that 100% or something. It's to the left of the 100%. There you go. Click that.
Slideshow?
Yeah, slideshow. That's it.
Can we see it now?
It's not doing slideshow, but okay.
Oh, it did on me. All right, let's try something else.
All right, well, just tab down. Let's go down to another slide. So this, okay. Whoa, that's all of them. We don't want that view.
We'll get there. All right, we're gonna have to look at
this view. Just tab down. Okay. Go down 2 pages. So this is what a channel reseller has. Here's their new software from.
I'm stuck on the narcissism slide for a sec here, Brian.
Well, but that's the way most software companies and software resellers sell. They do nothing. They don't listen to the client and the client's problems. They talk about themselves. So that's why I thought how appropriate. We'll create their company will sell narcissism. It's almost like a Coco Chanel fragrance. So the first thing these clowns do is they talk about themselves. They tell you how long they've been in business and, how many people they have and, how many different industries.
We have served 27 industries.
Well, the next vendor will sell 28, and who cares? And then they'll tell you about all the awards that they won. I love these awards. The Function Feature Demo Pentathlon.
Most lopsided deal.
Yeah, the most lopsided deal. I love that one. That's a good one to win. And what's the third one there? The best story told to a prospect. Okay, so think about those, and like any prospect really wants to hear that kind of crud. Keep going. Here's some more awards. What are these? That's more of the same. Keep going. Yeah. And then they go, and by the way, did we tell you who we are? They keep telling you that, all about themselves and never once think to ask the prospect, what is it you really need? Now we're going to have Our most overused cliches. Oh, yeah. Like in the fast food industry, everybody talks about three things: cleanliness, quality, and low cost. And in the software industry, we hear the same overused kind of expressions from one vendor to the next, and none of it means anything to a prospect.
Oh, come on, man. TCO.
Who cares about low cost TCO when, I don't know. I can't believe it. And I'll tell you why. There was a very major vendor this week had some big announcements, and they talked about how their new thing that they're doing is going to reduce overall TCO. Now, that sounds good on the surface, but what they're really saying is now the new version of our product, you have to buy more software from us, use more of our cloud services, and you have to decommission your on-prem stuff. And that's how we get the TCO down. We aren't going to lose a nickel in revenue, but you've got to take cost away from some other area. That's how they get a lower TCO. Oh, spare me. Oh, and by the way, did we tell you who we are? And
I think I'm detecting a pattern here for this slide. Usually we have these duplicate slide issues, but I think there's a reason.
No, they're in there every time. Because
oh my God, that's hilarious.
When you sit through these really bad demos, and I welcome all the listeners to just pile in, like, you ever had to go through one of these egotistical, let me tell you how great I am or my vendor is or my product is, and you just get that to death. Instead of actually taking the time, like you were talking about Challenger Sale, to find out about the prospect and their problems. Keep going. The next one. Our tech stack, we don't understand it, but we know you'll pay dearly for it. And we work on complex problems, and we celebrate with our clients' money afterwards. So, that's another thing. Every one of these decks somewhere in about the sixth slide has that bunch of little rectangular, looks like bricks that show our technology platform or our cloud platform or our application stack platform. Everybody's got one, like it matters. They're all pretty much variations on a theme. That's not differentiating, folks. I hate to break it to you. Greg, I am lifted higher.
Thomas wants to throw a wrench in your discussion, Brian. Isn't that at least some introduction is necessary?
Outside of people knowing your names and what company you're from, they don't care. Like there's a software vendor I know, everybody in the company has 4-line item deep job title on their business card. I mean, who needs to know that you're the executive associate vice president of the Mid-Atlantic region of the vending machine sub-vertical, second in command? I don't care. All I want to know is, can you solve my business problem? So
Brian, how do you feel about the logo slide?
Okay, we're coming to that.
We got 50 logos onto the slide for you, man.
We're coming to that. Go ahead, tab right to it. You're getting. So here we go. Our incredible client list. Actually, I have one with 1 million deals on. Customer logo things on there, and it just says, we would love if all these were our customers. There's all these logos, maybe we can put yours on here someday. Anyway, maybe they're just camera shy. I like that. All right, keep going. In all weather. Okay. Next slide.
What Thomas says here, being a consultant, the customers do care about the creds of the consultancy.
Yes, but they also care more, I think, about the credentials of the individual consultants that are actually going to do the work, instead of somebody who shows up to win it but never comes back again. But
the other thing I would argue there, Thomas, is that I think that might play a role as far as you're not gonna even get onto a meaningful sales call with a prospect if they don't do a little homework on you or you send them some background information of some kind. But my bias once I'm on a call with someone is not to tell them about how great I am and what a forward-thinking guru I am, but to get in the fray with them and talk about their problem and their situation, and by doing that, demonstrate the relevance of what I'm doing. And if I can't do that, then I should pack up my bag and go home anyhow.
Yeah, you're not a fit. Okay, next slide.
All right, back to the slides for a sec. We'll get back to your argumentative stuff in a sec, Thomas. Did we tell you who we are? Oh,
yeah,
right,
yeah. So
we've
to
been doing
Thomas,
this for a long time. Yeah.
so for Thomas's benefit here, you can peel layers and layers of who we are out. Okay, keep going. Okay. Oh, yeah. The 36-hour function feature demo. Yeah. We don't know what your problems are, so we're going to show you every capability in our package and hope that somehow we stumble across something that might make a difference for you. So, you know, I hate these unfocused waste of time, so anyway, yeah, we can close that out. But anyway, I wasn't trying to hijack your presentation today.
No, that's great. It actually fits right in with what I was talking about earlier and added a whole different dimension to it, so it ended up working out really well.
So I'll give you a postscript on this. I used that in the first 2 minutes of a keynote at a big reseller event for a major ERP vendor, and at the end of my remarks, we're going to take a break, and everyone's running out. Back when we had conferences, they're all running out to get a cup of coffee. There's 2,000 people at this thing. It's not a small event. And this lady comes running down the center aisle, coming right up to the stage to see me. And I'll never forget her words, because I thought, is she going to kill me, or is she crazy or something? She's just charging down that aisle. And then she goes, I have to have a copy of that presentation. And I go, because? And she goes, because my husband resells this product, and that's the exact presentation he uses, where all he does is talk about himself and the company. And I need to take that presentation and show it to him and tell him to knock that shit off. That's her exact words.
Let's revisit the chat debate. There's a couple good points here. Greg is saying to Thomas, genuine credentials, here's where we were successful and how we deliver real value, and here's who executed. Then Thomas responds, Greg, that's what we usually do. We have the consultants in the pitch, not only the sales guys.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't think we're too far apart on this topic, really. And Thomas also says +1 to the feature and function demo, though I do want to point out that that feature, we talk about delivering value to customers. Those feature and function demos are excellent sleep aids. And if anyone on the call is having trouble getting to sleep at night, if you give them a copy that recording with the demo deck, I mean, it's better than ocean sounds as far as getting to sleep. So,
by the way, John, I mentioned I have multiple versions of the Undeck, and I have one, and it shows it starts off with, first there's a picture of the globe with a million little red dots on it, and it's like, we wish we had offices everywhere, but someday we'll have customers and offices in those places. It's generated by the agilistic. Oh, I love that word. What? We're getting some good copy here.
I think one really interesting thing around this is to figure out how, for vendors in particular, to figure out how to talk about their technical innovations and how they deliver product and how that makes a difference for customers. Brian, I don't know if you remember, we had a couple high-level conversations with the ERP firm about this, where they were insistent that multi-tenancy didn't matter. This was years ago now. But part of their point was, they're like, well, it's our job to control the costs. We can do that any way we need to. We're not going to pass that along to the customer. And we were pushing back saying, well, you need to be efficient in your architecture so that you can provide value to customers. But I think it's just really important to be able to talk about that in the right way, not in terms of how great your technology is, but more about, that's why we can deliver features to you and things that you care about in a really cost-effective way. That's the goal. I'm not talking about, oh my gosh, we got the shiniest architecture, because I don't want to hear that. But I also don't want to hear, oh, you've got a legacy architecture that you're swallowing the cost of that, because eventually that catches up with me. So it's a really interesting discussion, I think.
Yeah, I love it when you got a vendor who's didn't bother to read the RFI or the RFP, shows up to do a demo, doesn't follow any of the demo instructions that were sent to him in advance, and they're in there. Maybe we want a transportation solution, i.e., like a car. And instead, they're talking about basically a giant overpriced armored tank with a 105 millimeter gun on top. And I'm like, why are you wasting our time here? This is just, you're just so unfocused on what you're trying to deliver. Anyway, I think we had our fun with the Undeck. Again, I can make a bigger version sometime, and I could put all 40 egregious slides in there because we missed the slides. I got them another deck that show like a picture of our glorious leader, who sat at the knee of Charlemagne to learn how to program, the original version of the product. Then there's, you got to have a picture of some.
Don't you usually have a picture of him hanging off the side of a cliff with like a crampon as well? Yeah. Like when he's not scaling Mount Everest, he's delivering customer satisfaction.
Yeah, that's a good one. I also like all the ones with people in sailboats. I don't know what sailing has anything to do with slamming code, but whatever. We get a lot of you see a lot of those CEO pictures too. And I'm not picking on anybody. I'm saying I see a lot of them from several companies, and they're glorious leaders. Anyway, but frankly, I sit with the clients. I'm sitting there with them, and I'm watching and reading the audience, and I could tell they're like either bored out of their mind or they're really frustrated because the vendor is not addressing them or their problems. And that wastes everybody's time, and I guarantee it's going to result in a no sale.
Brian, weren't you telling me about a classic Factory of the Future sales pitch where the vendor brought out this super archaic technology to demo?
Oh my God. Yeah. That was about 2 years ago. And we had sent them very explicit material about what they're interested in, including like a digital fingerprint. They wanted to know from the moment something hit their receiving dock till it went out on the shipping dock. They want to know everybody touched it.
So just to be clear to the listeners, you were working with a customer to help them manage vendor selection for Correct. A Factory of the Future. So anyway, continue.
So they had three major ERP vendors. They had pieces of three major vendor solutions in there, and they thought, well, we've heard all this great stuff about IoT and Factory of the Future and Fourth Industrial Revolution from all three of these vendors. Let's put them on the short list as well and have them come into demo. Well, we knew we were in for trouble because the first vendor showed up, and the client project team only had 8 or 10 people on it, and the first vendor showed up with right at 25 people from their firm to come in for a one-day demo. So we knew got a problem here. Another one comes in, and we ask them for show us all this advanced technology you're going to put to bear on the shop floor. And they pulled out a Telzon reader from like 1999. I mean, this thing reads barcodes. That's what it does. That was it. And we're going, that's, this is our advanced deal. And the guy couldn't even get it to work. He could not make the connection to the ERP software in the demo. The next guy's coming, oh yeah, we got all that Factory of the Future stuff. We got everything. I mean to tell you, it's incredible what we got. It's fascinating. What does he pull out? A Telzon handheld reader. And that was it. That's all they had was a barcode reader. All three vendors. That was the extent of their pre-configured advanced technology. One of my clients was so livid. He stood up when he saw one of those barcode readers come out, and he goes, when I was over at, and he rattled a competitor's name, another aerospace firm, in 10 or 12 years ago, he goes, I went out and bought some of those things, and I enabled barcode back then. And this is all you've been able to do in 10 years? And he goes, where's the RFID and everything else? He goes, since you have nothing, I have no reason to waste my time with it. He just turned around and walked out the room, and that was the end of him for the whole demo. So I kind of knew I don't have to work too hard to convince the client we should drop them off the short list. That one was going to go away pretty quick.
Yeah, what's the opposite of the challenger sale? The unable to challenge sale.
No, I think that's the challenged sale.
Oh my goodness, yes. Oh, that's just brutal.
But here's the best of all of this stuff, John. As at the end of it all, then I guarantee you there's some account executive. I love that name. They don't do anything but just show up for the demos. And they come over and they'll talk to me because they know I'm the lead troublemaker and probably the most influential person in the deal, because I can wipe out a vendor like that if they're really bad. And they're coming over and like, Brian, I think we did a fantastic job, don't you? I'm like, I don't know what meeting you were in, but no, you didn't. And then, well, what could we do better? You know, I'm like, well, you could do the whole thing all over, but my class is not going to give you that time. Anyway, I just hate the AE who wants to try and salvage something. And I get it if there's some legitimate things that maybe there were some open items that we had on a point sheet, but when you just blow it from start to finish, there's nothing that can salvage that. Nothing I can do or anybody can do.
Yeah, we have a post that I did, Diginomica early post 2014. Selling is changing. Stop putting and start blogging, and put your putter down and start blogging. Sounds like a great tagline for my motivational blog workshops. And so I say, is it catchy? But it's good advice. And I caught up with you, and we actually did a video on profound change, and we talk about the much feared informed buyer who is already savvy to the pros and cons before a single conversation takes place. And, you said in that, you talked about the context of the challenger sale and how you see buyers who are as well informed on pricing and functionality as the people in the room, which it kind of explains the situation you just described with the barcode readers, where the buyer was ahead of the vendors. Really interesting.
Oh, yeah. And I often find that the vendor's marketing department that's been, pushing all kinds of great slideware and messaging to like the CEO to use at user conferences and other kinds of venues, they may be 2 years in front of where the product actually is and what the field organization has access to for demo perspectives. So there can be some real disconnects there. I also want to say, in all fairness, clients also aren't free of original sin either. So they can do some things that I'm sure, any of the software vendors listening in on this, I don't want them to think that all I do is just make vendors' lives difficult. I have my hands full trying to get clients to behave in an ethical, straight up and fair fashion as well. And thankfully, most of them are really good, believe it or not. And I know I will never let a client just call in vendors just because they're just looking for some free ideas and then with no intention of using them. That's just not the ethical thing to do. If you're not going to bring them in an open-minded way, then you shouldn't do it at all.
Very good. So before we wrap up, you put a post on Diginomica. We don't have time to get into the entire thrust of it. Oh, wait, Thomas wants to say one thing first. Oftentimes the client just wants to do the same old thing with new software. True that.
Yep.
So anyway, you put on a post. We're not going to get into all of it today because there's a lot there, but I recommend folks check it out. Time changes and the impact on ERP, accounting, and business practices. And if you want to get a little bit of a flavor for some of this, check out the last week's discussion Brian and I had about Factory of the Future, because some of it comes down to Brian describing how ERP cost accounting isn't really going to be able to keep up with the Factory of the Future in terms of you have to rethink time increments, the precision that you want in your costs, basically more real-time cost accounting. Brian, you can go into a little more detail on your point there, but it was interesting because we also had a reader push back on that. So I want to give you a chance to respond to a couple of the pushbacks you got on that as well.
Well, I think the bottom line is I just argued that we've had decades or centuries of some very fixed time things, like what's a pay period. It's often a negotiated deal between employers and employees, because payroll has traditionally been a very difficult and expensive thing to process. But employees, if you don't pay them every week or 2 weeks, they're going to want to seek greener pastures elsewhere where they can get paid in a timely fashion. So we know that.
And you pointed out that in the gig economy, some people are getting paid every day.
Well, not just gig, but it's today's economy. Paychex and ADP, they both have these. I think Ceridian Dayforce, it's called Pay Wallet. But they have these utilities now. People can get paid every day. So the concept of a pay period, a fixed, rigid, unchanging pay period, it's gone. And we're moving in accounting to a thing called the continuous close, as opposed to fixed accounting periods necessarily. All these are artifacts of the past. And we can move them to the past because the speed with which information can be collected, transmitted, and processed now has gotten really fast and really cheap. And that means we need to rethink processes and technology. Where we got into this Grange war on my article afterwards is that someone took what I wrote and was extending it to mean that every little sensor blip, like a status record coming off of an IoT sensor that just says situation normal, there's nothing wrong with this device, that we're going to send bazillions of these things all the way into the general ledger. And, there's limitations. I'll tell you guys, the Diginomic folks, they know I write long form pieces, and I think I write longer ones than even they like, but I can't submit a book for a post. So I got to kind of bound these pieces. I didn't get into this argument about where do you put all this data. Well, the bottom line is some of the data stays in like a historian or history kind of database, maybe at the plant level or in near controller devices, and it gets acted on only when anomalies get detected, but it never goes to the general ledger. There's some stuff that gets acted on with that precise data from time to time, and it gets sent to a cost accounting system, and you can still have a pretty modest amount of information flying in there. And there are a few events that will go all the way to the general ledger, but we have to think in terms of like either subledgers, to use an accounting term, or a data warehouse or repository for some of the other stuff. Regardless, a lot of this depends on the kind of business you're in, how many bazillion steps are in your production process and so forth. You got to come up with an architecture that works for your firm. But the bottom line, though, is it's the measurement windows are shrinking, and that creates an opportunity for you guys to come up with more precise ways to figure out, are we making money on individual batches, products, product lines, to customers, whatever. That's what you really get out of the benefit from it. So I just want people to look at the benefit option. This really wasn't, my article was not a treatise on where do you park the data. I want to be clear about that.
So Brian, just one real quick thing on that. In the case of a project that's dealing with that, are you advocating that reconfiguring their existing ERP solution will help them to solve a lot of that? Or are you essentially arguing that they may need to modernize their ERP backend with a newer version of the product, or does it depend on the situation?
At a minimum, you need to rethink what I'd call all your master data. That's one. Right. You need to rethink what kind of information and dashboards, management reports, analytics, and everything else you're going to want out of something like cost accounting. You probably have to rethink how you do inventory accounting. You may want to think about, if we're going to create P&Ls by customer, by product, by whatever, how are we going to stitch together the revenue from like the sales side of the house with this detailed cost data? Can we get these all synchronized at the right level of detail at the right time? And how do we do all this kind of stuff in real time? I think architecturally, there's a bunch of plumbing questions you got to answer. You can't just do a packagectomy and pop out an older version of ERP and not change anything functionally about it and expect that all this is going to, auto magically, to use your favorite word, John. I don't know if that was one of your mystery words for today, but if it's going to, okay, thank you for that. But it's not going to you're not going to get the benefit you want unless you think through all these other things. And a classic one you got to worry about is even something as dull, as intercompany accounting could change as well, depending on how you're going to move this stuff around.
Yeah, and just for our listeners, Brian has now successfully rebutted the comments on his piece, but you may want to check it out on Diginomica. The name of the piece is Time Changes and the Impact on ERP Accounting and Business Practices, or you could do a search Brian Summer Diginomica. It'll pop right up. And the thing I wanted to just frame here for the listeners is we don't have a chance for a deep discussion today, but where I see this being important for everyone to talk about is that this sort of frames a debate between for those who are embracing some type of transformation, which obviously needs to be process, culture, and tech in their industry. There are different competing models on how to do that. And one is ring fencing your ERP system because it's a legacy architecture anyway, and focusing on customer facing applications and pursuits, but which is obviously heavily advocated by CRM vendors and such. But then, of course, there's a different argument that a lot of ERP vendors make, which is you need to modernize your ERP and think about what modern ERP looks like. And there's no one right answer to all these questions because it's very customer specific. And I would never advocate that customers need to upgrade their software by definition to make transformations happen. I think that's that's why people like Brian are in business, because they need to advise customers on exactly what their situation is. But it's a very, very important debate, I think, for people to have. And the only thing I would add to that is that I do believe quite strongly that the future of ERP is mostly cloud and definitely industry. So in other words, what Brian's talking about here, it's not going to work well if the ERP is not designed for your industry, and if you have a proprietary industry system that's holding a bunch of data that the ERP system needs in order to make these kinds of the incremental changes, whether it's real time or near real time or what have you. To me, that's the future, is to figure out how these data sets can be better aligned and integrated. And to Brian's point, some of that's a master data problem as well. To me, that's the conversations customers have to have. It's not as simple as, oh, we want to change our process in this way. You have to think about all these implications as well. So anyway.
Yeah. To that, I would add, the way your company makes, if you're in a products-based company, the way you make your product probably isn't going to fundamentally change in a major way. It's if I got better information and more information, could I make better decisions around like which customers are actually even, do we really even know how much profitability a specific plant or operation is responsible for? And do we really understand what the fully loaded costs are at each individual facility? And should we make macro level adjustments to move our production around to other different facilities to get better financial results as a company? You can't do that at a lot of companies because you don't even have the basic data and you don't have reliable kind of cost information to make those decisions. As amazing as that statement sounds, in this day and age, that is often quite true. So yeah. I would agree. We've got all kinds of opportunity to do all kinds of digitalization stuff. But if your firm is only borderline functional right now compared to dysfunctional, you're not even at process excellent yet, let alone to be thinking about having some kind of industry transformation impact. You got some crawl before you walk kind of problems you got to deal with. And I'm not sure fixing or replacing the ERP is always the first step you go to. You need a plan first, and you really need to think this out. It's like building a house. You got plumbing, electric, and everything else to worry about. Businesses are just as complex, and you got to sort out and figure out what makes sense to start with in this firm.
Yeah, and to your point around the end customer, they have to own their transformation, and they have to figure out what those proper next steps are, because too often I find customers buying into a particular vendor's version of transformation, which is not necessarily the one they should be adopting. And LinkedIn user says, would love to create a better environmental landscape for the big corporates. We could really do with an IT reset where help desks are reevaluated using basic chatbots, use a data scientist to analyze the results of something relevant. That's the dream of, in my mind, if you talk about the proper use of AI and automation technology, is make the mundane stuff as automated as possible, and then provide real human intervention and services where it's needed the most. But to Brian's point, I think we're a long way off from a lot of those things. For example, how many enterprises are really deploying their best people to serve their most profitable customers? Not very many, because they don't know who their most profitable customers are. And, so that's I think part of the issue here. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I know you didn't want to debate the whole thing, so I think we're starting to debate the whole thing.
I think we're just about ready. Unless you have a final word, I think we'll sign off for the day.
No, I think we're pretty much there.
Thanks for that masterful slide demonstration, Brian, and appreciate the audience bearing with us while we did that on the fly. I think we give ourselves a B- there for presentation on that, but at least you did see the slides, so that's something. But yeah, so just so you guys know, I am going to be continuing to do this Fridays, just about 4 p.m. Eastern time every Friday. The start time might vary slightly certain weeks, and Brian will be coming back regular. My next few guests are not Brian, so it's possible we will do a special Brian Summer day on another day if we think of something that we really want to do. So if that happens, you'll just have to keep your eyes out, because your LinkedIn Live notification will be your best asset. But I'll try to put that out a few days in advance so you can see it on the feed. Anyhow, thanks to all of you in the feed for commenting. And thanks. We got the good feedback on your slides, Brian. So definitely a lot of interest in a further deck. And
I just wish I'd have had. I wish I'd have known I was going to do that, because I would have made a collage one that would have been where I got the best parts of a whole bunch of them, or the worst parts of a bunch of them, however you want to look at it. It would have been a laugh riot. But anyway, you guys got the drift. You quit talking about yourselves and talk to the client. All right.
Thanks, Thomas. If you missed the beginning of that, you may want to catch the replay, because I got into more hyper-personalization and content stuff, but a lot of it by heart anyhow. And those of you who haven't seen Thomas's blog this week, check it out on the Customer 360 stuff. I think I might actually be quoted in it, but that's not why you should read it, because my quote's at the end. You should read the whole thing. So anyhow, thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time.
See you, everybody. Thanks.